My name is Monica, and for those of you that know me from my weekly vlogs or monthly vlogs, you know all about me. But for those of you that are just new here for the book reviews, I have a vlog channel. I've had a channel on YouTube since 2007 actually, and I have been during COVID become a voracious reader. I cannot believe how many books I personally have read. Now, I know there's some people that I've noticed here on YouTube that read 20 books a month. There's no way I could do that. I do other things, knitting, arts and crafts, other things. But last year I read 26 books, I think. So for me, that was a lot of books. So there's so many of them that I want to share with so many people. I thought I'd share with you my top 10 books of 2020. So without further ado, I want you guys to go and fix yourself a cup of tea or some coffee, and we will get started. I notice you can see my ring light in my glasses there. Anyway, go fix yourself a tea or a cup of coffee, and I'll get started. I love book review videos because I feel like you're kind of strolling through a bookstore and kind of looking inside or getting just a little taste inside that inside flap of the book when somebody talks about their books. But I plan on doing a book review at the end of every month, and I'm a little bit behind because it's already the beginning of February. So I'm going to be coming out very, very soon with the books I read in January. So let's get started. Now, these books are in no particular order. I just plunked them here on the table. The first book I want to talk about is Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. And this is classified under psychology and schizophrenia and biography. So it's more of a memoir, and it's really written in a sense that one chapter talks about the family and their history and their life. And then the other chapter is more like a psychology university book explaining the different types of schizophrenia and how they've treated it over the years. So it kind of flips back and forth. This story is about a family of 12 children. You see them here. She's pregnant in this top picture. They lived on Hidden Valley Road, and of her 12 children, 6 of her sons became schizophrenic. So can you just imagine living with that? And this was during the, I think, 60s. So or maybe early 70s, let's just see. I think it was the 60s and mid 70s. 6 of the 10 Galvin boys, one after the other, were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And the other 6 stood by, and horrified, not knowing would they be the next one. I thought it was a really, really good book, very educational, gave you a lot of information on mental illness, and sometimes the people we see on the streets, just a completely more educated view on mental health. And for that, that's why I recommend this book. It was really good. This was an Oprah Book Club choice. She had a book club in 2020, and this was one of the choices, and I highly recommend this book. The second book I want to talk about is called The Vanishing Half. I don't have my copy with me right now because it is I lent it to some members of our Follow the Star book club, and they are reading it. It's this month's book club, and I had already read it, so they're reading it. But it's a story about twins in the South, and they live in this town where it's an imaginary town where everybody, the sort of originator of the town, like their great-great-great-grandfather, only wanted the town to be full of mixed race people or black-skinned people with very, very light skin. So in the South at that time, I'm sure there were a lot, because a lot of the slaves were raped by their masters and their children were light. So he wanted this town just full of all of these light-skinned people. So these twins are born, they're both light-skinned and carry on with their life. And one of the twins decides she wants to leave and pass as white. It's such a good story, and it's very popular right now, The Vanishing Half. And for people that are of color, they will understand how within your own race there can even be prejudices between the shade of your skin, like if you're really, really dark or really, really light, and all the things that come with that, even within your own race. And so this book really speaks to that as well, plus the bond of the twins, how it's broken, and the vanishing half, meaning one of the halves is out of the picture. I don't want to tell you too much because it'll ruin the story, but it's a very, very good book. So it's called The Vanishing Half. So the next one I'm going to pick, and again, they're in no particular order, is Eleanor Oliphant is All Right. Now, my biggest beef with this book, I love this story. It's a Reese's Book Club choice, Reese Witherspoon. And she says here, beautifully written and incredibly funny. And then someone on the back says, simultaneously hilarious and heartbreaking. Well, that's pretty good. But when I was reading it, I kept looking for the hilariousness, the hilarity of this book. And I just didn't find it funny. I didn't. Eleanor is a very odd girl for reasons you'll find out in the book. She appears to be a little bit on the spectrum of autism. So when she does her things that are hilarious, I didn't find them hilarious. I don't know. So that was the thing that threw me off when I'm reading this on the cover about how funny and hilarious it is, and so hilarious. I didn't find it that way. But that's not to say the book was not really good. One thing the author did excellent in this book, Gail Honeyman, the character development of Eleanor is unbelievable. It's just fantastic. From when you first start reading about her until the book goes on and on and on. It's incredible. And it's a really, 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 really good story. And I think in the end, it is moving and uplifting. But like it says here, a wacky, charming novel, hilarious and moving. The hilarious is what throws me. The hilarious is what throws me because I just didn't see the hilarity in it. So what I didn't like is what was written on the side covers and inside covers and stuff. But what's it within these pages? Excellent book. So I'm sure you guys have seen this around a lot. Eleanor Oliphant is okay, or is completely fine. It's really good. So I would choose this one. It's very easy to read. It's not very long, 316 pages. It's not a long book, and it's not hard to read. So, whereas Hidden Valley Road it's not that it's hard to read, but when it comes to the chapters on the schizophrenia, it can be, laboring. Like you're like, what? But it's so good because when it goes to the parts about the kids and the family and the memoir of their story, it's really, really good. So my next choice is Jan Arden's If I Knew Then. Jan Arden is an amazing vocalist, musician. She's hilarious. She has a sitcom on in Canada, and she's just a Canadian icon for us. But she's like also, this is her, I believe, third book? Oh, no, second. The first one was Feeding My Mother, and this one is If I Knew Then. And it's about finding wisdom in the power of aging. But what I found, oh, so heartwarming. She has lost her parents, and she talks about when she loses her mom and her dad and the things that happened at the bedside. And it was like almost parallel to what happened with my mom. And the feelings that she was feeling is exactly the feelings I was feeling. And I just found such parallel and camaraderie with her in this book. It's just so good. Oh, and it's a memoir, and it talks about her relationship with her parents. And, you know, it wasn't perfect. Whose was? And, you know, here she's got this, I loved my dad, but I didn't always like him. Just really good. This book here helped me through my grief. And she also talks about, as you're getting older, like I'm older than her, but as you age and you become a crone, and in your wisdom, how you look at things and how things are so much better in your wisdom than they were when you were younger. So if you can get your hands on this book, this is a really nice one. My sister gave me this for a gift for my birthday, and that was like a month after my mom had passed away, and it was so good. So it's Jan Arden, If I Knew Then. Great read. Now, my next book, I read this at the beginning of the year, and I loved it. You know how you just get lost in a book? This was one of those, like, novels, like it's like a TV show. You're just lost in the book. This book is about a young girl. Her name, I can't even remember, Kaya. And she was called the Marsh Girl because she was quite poor, and she lived near the marshlands. I think it's in Florida, and or somewhere in the south, but she lives near the marsh and the water. And it just talks about her struggles, and there was a time when she was just all by herself, and something happens in the town, and they try to blame it on Kaya. And it's just a beautiful book. She grows up in this book, coming of age. It's just all about her, like your heart breaks for Kaya, especially when she's younger, and for what she has to live through. But she's so resilient and so brilliant. She doesn't even know how smart she is. And then the struggle of what happens being blamed on her. It's just a really good story. Where the Crawdads Sing by, Amma. This is a story about the Atlantic slave trade, and Amma is the girl's name. And it tells you the story. First of all, let me preface this by saying, people that are trying to understand slavery in America, and first of all, you have to understand the backstory, and you have to understand where it started. And this is a really good book to explain to you. It's fiction. Amma's a fictional character, and she lives in a small village that is raided, and she's kidnapped and taken and sold to the slave traders on the ships and all of that. So it's written by a man, and his name is Manu, oh, there it is, Herbstein. So he's not African, but he studies in African studies, I believe. There are parts of it I found were quite graphic, but it's just like a movie. Like, you know, there's parts of movies that are too. I don't know, they don't seem to have a thing about the author. One thing they do have, though, that I absolutely loved is this glossary in the back, because there are so many African names and terms. So if I came across, there it is, if I came across a word that I was reading, I would just actually left a marker on this page and I would mark it, and so I could quickly go to the back and see what it meant, you know, because a lot of times you assume you know and you don't know. And then this one was the characters, the people. So it was characters, and it literally says characters, and it's listed. Principal characters are shown in bold type, and an asterisk indicates a historical character. So it's intermingled with real historical characters, so you can see that. So that really helped throughout the book. And I don't know if you can see the picture of the girl in the cover there. See her? Amma? This was excellent. Really, 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 really good book. This is the book. For those of you that don't know, I commented on this book. This was an Oprah Book Club book choice of last year, 2020, early in the year. And I commented on this book on Oprah's book club page. My comment was picked up by one of Oprah's producers, and they asked to emailed me, and I ended up going to Tucson, which is a border town between Mexico and Tucson, and I was on the Oprah show, and I spoke on the Oprah show and actually spoke to Oprah. So this is a big deal. And the author, she autographed it for me. And I have since, her name's Janine Cummings, she said, for Monica, stay warm up there. And then thank you for reading, Janine Cummings. So this is a real keepsake for me. Oh, so good. This book is a story, fictional story, about a migrant family and their struggle and their journey to cross the border into America, and what happens to them along the way. And so when this book came out, because Janine Cummings isn't Latino, well, she is part, her grandma is part Latino, so but it was written by basically a white woman. There was up in arms from all of these Latino authors, and threatening to, when she was doing a book opening or a book showing, they were threatening to show up and start revolts and everything, that this book was written. And so the reason Oprah had people come to the show, she wanted different commentaries from different people. She had migrant families on the show. She had the book publisher on the show. Of course, she had Janine Cummings on the show. She had Latino authors expressing their opinions, New York Times Latino column writer. And so this big discussion happened there. And I don't think it was the content of the book more than it was Oprah choosing this author over Latino authors. That was kind of, you know, it's like, my book's out there, why aren't you choosing my book? Why would you choose her book? So it was kind of that kind of thing. And they showed the train, I think they call it La Bestia, like the big beast. And they show the trains with all the people, the real trains, not just from this. And it was unbelievable. And the fact that I was right there in a border town where these poor migrants are trying to cross the border, it was unbelievable. So this was, first of all, it's a great story. But second of all, for me personally, it was more than a story, it was an experience, because I got to go be on the Oprah show and talk to Oprah. So that was a big deal. And met Janine, and I still chat with her back and forth on Instagram. So that's kind of cool. But the story itself is excellent. And if you want to understand what it's like for the migrant families coming through with their children, this is the book, or one of the books. I don't want to, this book for me explained a lot. American Dirt. So, by Janine Cummings. Great book. So my next book is called Yellow Crocus. Yellow Crocus by Layla Ibrahim. Yellow Crocus is a story of a young girl named Elizabeth, born to a white family, and she's taken from her mother and handed over to her enslaved wet nurse, Maddie. And it's about Maddie and Elizabeth's relationship, and also how at the same time Maddie had just had a baby, and she had to separate from her baby to be enabled to live in the big house and nurse Elizabeth. And their relationship, they were very, very, very close, as were a lot of the master's children with their nannies, or because those were the women that cared for them most of the time. So it's just the story of, can these two women like have a real true ongoing relationship when one is a slave and one is not a slave and is the master and owns the plantation. So, but yet they love each other. So it's really, really good and moving and touching. So it's called Yellow Crocus by Layla Ibrahim. I really enjoyed this. And all these top 10 books were my top 10. I loved them all. Okay, another book I want to talk about. It's 50 Words for Rain by Asha Lemmy. I cried in this book. This is a love story like no other, but it's between siblings. It is so beautiful and so well written. Again, it's another story of, this one takes place in Japan, and the little girl, her mother drops her off. Her mother and her mother's family are part of a huge dynasty, and they're very, very wealthy. And the little girl is mixed race because her mother, during the war, had a relationship with a black GI soldier. And I don't know what happened or why he went back. Well, I do know, but I'm not going to tell you right now. But anyway, so the mom was left with this little girl, and she was a disgrace to the family, a complete disgrace. So the mother finally dropped her off at her grandmother's place, who was very, very strict and very, very mean. And she would even have the little girl take daily baths in bleach to hopefully lighten her skin. And then her brother comes into the picture. It's beautiful. It's called 50 Words for Rain. Beautiful. I was so moved by this book. I was like boo-hooing. It was so good. And one extra bonus book. This is like it'll be book 11 after I show you the last one. was called Emmeline, and it's a very old book. And I somehow went down the rabbit hole on YouTube, and I don't know how this video came up, called Emmeline. And it's a story of this young girl in America, not sure where, in the USA. And this was in the early 20s, 30s. And her family was very poor, so the young poor girls of the town were picked up. They lived in a boarding house in the town, and they worked for fabric producer, where they, you know, wove the fabric and did all those things, and then they stayed in this woman's boarding house. So somehow our young 14-year-old girl gets in the family way, and she doesn't keep the baby. But then years later, somehow the baby is now a man, comes back into her life. And that's all I'm going to say about that. It's a true story, but it reads like a novel. Unbelievable, called Emmeline. So look that one up too. I think it's by Judith Rossner, I believe. I will pop pictures of both 50 Words for Rain and Emmeline because they are on my Kobo. So they're ebooks. So they weren't like a hard copy book, but I thoroughly enjoyed them both. The very last book, and I left it last on purpose, even though there was no rhyme or reason for those other ones, is the book Cast. This was an Oprah book choice. Oprah said when she brought this book out that this should be read by every single person in North America. As a matter of fact, she sent, I think, was it 5,000 copies to different, I'm not sure if it's 500 or 5,000, but a whole lot of them. She sent them to university heads all over the United States and had them read this so they can understand the color problem and the racial problem. This book, oh my God. It is nonfiction, and it's just so chock full of what you can do if you are a non-BIPOC person. BIPOC means Black, Indigenous, people of color. So a lot of people during the Black Lives Matter, when it was at its height, were asking, what can I do? What can I do as a white person? What can I do? Read this book. I'm just telling you, read this book. Even for someone like me who knows my history, I know my Black history, there's so many things in here I didn't even know. I mean, Isabel Wilkerson compares the slavery in the United States to the caste system in India. And when she breaks it down, it is, you're just mind blown. Like, I read this book with book darts, which are like Post-it notes, but they're little metal things. Can you see them all in there? Everywhere you can see the page separated, there's a book dart. And because it's things that I want to come back and refer to. Like, here's one right here. Here's a little quote from the book. And it was spring of 1944, the same year that a Black boy was forced to jump to his death in front of his stricken father over the Christmas card the boy had sent to a white girl at work. In that atmosphere, a 16-year-old African-American girl thought about what should befall of Hitler. I guess she had been given an essay to write, what do you think should happen to Hitler? She said she won the student essay contest with a single sentence. And she said, put him in a black skin and let him live the rest of his life in America. Because she thought that would be the perfect punishment for Hitler. This is a 16-year-old girl. So this was in 1944. It's so good. It's really heavy in the sense that it's not funny and it's not pleasant, but it needs to be looked at. There is one chapter in here, the analogy is so good. When people say, well, it's not my problem. I'm not black, and it's not my problem. I don't need to fix anything. I'm not racist, and I don't, I'm not like those people that are racist. It's like inheriting a home, an old home, and there's a rotting roof in the corner of the home, and it's rotting and rotting and rotting and rotting. So think of the home as North America, because I'm not just saying just the United States. Think of the home as North America, and there's this rotting area in the corner of that home. Are you going to sit and live in that home knowing that the rot is going to pretty soon destroy your home, or are you going to do everything in your power to try to fix it? And that was one of the analogies and casts that I thought was fantastic, and there's so many more. She is brilliant. So this is not, like I said, it's not a happy book, but it is just incredible. And even though I read this earlier in the year, it's still like comes to me. I quote this a lot. I refer back to this a lot, just in general conversation. I think everyone should read this book, Cast. So Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. It should be in every home, black, white, indigenous, don't care the color of your skin. This book should be in your home and should be read. It's so, so, so good. She broke it down in this book. So those are my 10 books that I read in 2020 that I enjoyed the most and also learned the most. So thank you very, very much for listening to my book review of my top 10 books of 2020. I hope you go out and grab one of them and read them, because I find during COVID for me, it's 100% escapism. If I can get lost in a book, it's just like the time just flies by. And when I used to work in a school, we used to have USSR reading time right after lunch. It was undisturbed, silent, sustained reading, USSR. And so the kids would come in after lunch, they would go grab their books. They could read books, comics, whatever, as long as they're reading, and it was appropriate. And they would sit for, I think the time was 20 minutes, I'm pretty sure. And the teacher too, she would have her novel, and everybody in the whole school was doing this silent reading. It was wonderful. So that's how I got back on the reading train, to discipline myself to read. So my USSR time is usually when I first get up, I have a cup of coffee, and I sit and read. And I like to limit my time. Depends on what I'm doing that day, but with COVID, I'm not doing anything. So I usually will read for about an hour, or sometimes I read 50 pages. It depends. But I set myself this time slot, and I keep reading until that time slot is over, even if you give yourself 15 minutes. It's a good way to discipline yourself, to get yourself back into reading. So I hope you guys all start reading or continue to read. And I'll be back really soon with my January books. I'll just show them all. It won't be my favorite of January. It will be what I read in January, what I read in February, and so on and so forth. So we'll see you all soon. Bye.